Hello everyone, and welcome back to another weather update. Tonight we're going to be mainly talking about this area in the Caribbean and then eventually into the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll really be just breaking this area down and looking at the weather models for tonight and just mainly focusing on this system. And then towards the very end of the video, we'll briefly talk about the severe weather threat for tonight and tomorrow, but we'll barely talk about this much in the video. But if y'all are new to the channel, welcome to the channel. Consider subscribing, disliking, or liking the video if you liked it. I would really appreciate it. I'm just trying my best to, not trying my best, but trying to grow the channel as much as I can and just really reach a wider audience. The more I continue to upload these forecasts and videos, but I also will have chapters in the video, so feel free to skip around to any part of the video y'all want to see. I'll try to make more in-depth chapters tonight compared to what I usually do, so y'all can get a better idea of some of the stuff that's in the video. So if y'all just want to skip to that part, y'all totally can. But let's go ahead and get started. So first, looking at our 2-day graphical tropical weather outlook, and this is the 7:22 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time update. This is the latest update, and it is about 2 hours. It was about 2 hours ago this was updated. But first, looking off of the coast of Africa here, we'll be looking just quickly at this system, and then we'll mainly talk about this. But there is a disturbance too that has a 0% chance of developing into a cyclone within the next 48 hours. And so we'll just quickly look at that once we get to the 7-day outlook. But again, that has a 0% chance of developing into a cyclone within the next 2 days. But then looking out here into the Caribbean, we do have disturbance. Well, technically it is Invest 97L, but this Invest right here has a 50% chance of developing into a tropical cyclone within the next 2 days. And then looking at the 7-day outlook, it has a 80% chance of developing into a tropical cyclone within the next 7 days as of the 7:22 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time update. And so as you can see, the area that it has a chance to develop into is all the way from parts of the Caribbean all the way into the Gulf of Mexico, where it has that 80% chance of developing. And then quickly looking out here into parts of the Central Atlantic, this area has a 60% chance of developing into a tropical cyclone within the next 7 days. And so this area isn't really supposed to affect anybody from the latest models, but we'll continue to watch it. But at this time, there's no threat. No threat that this system will pose from just the latest models and everything. But again, no worries really with this system at this time. But this is the main problem we'll be talking about within this video and looking at all of the weather models on. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, looking at the weather models, we'll be looking at the 18Z GFS from today on the 22nd of September. And so what we'll be doing just for right now is we'll be looking at but quite a few of the global models here on Tropical Tidbits, and we'll just be looking at each model, what they show, and then after that we'll be kind of comparing a little bit and just showing where the system might go. And then after we do that, we'll be looking at the ensemble models, and then lastly we'll be looking at the hurricane models with Invest 97L. And so I really won't be focusing a lot on the hurricane models, but it's just extra guidance that we should probably use when forecasting with this system. So again, first looking at the 18Z GFS here, it does have this system again into the Caribbean, and then we'll go to tomorrow morning. And so this pretty much has this system, the GFS has it strengthening just a little bit, and then eventually gets it into really a tropical storm maybe late tomorrow night into early on Tuesday, and that continues basically to the northwest there, and then it continues to impact parts of the Yucatan Peninsula and then into parts of western Cuba. into Tuesday night into Wednesday, and that continues to go to the northwest and eventually gets into the Gulf of Mexico. Then it shows that system really strengthening on Wednesday. It goes all the way from, just on the GFS here, it goes all the way from a 983 millibar storm to a 950 in just 6 to 12 hours there. So that would be some rapid intensification if this were to happen on the GFS, but then it will continue to strengthen, and then eventually make a landfall pretty much as a strong Category 3 hurricane here into the panhandle of Florida there. Then it will continue up to the north, go into Georgia, then into Tennessee, and impact places into the southeast U.S., into parts of Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and then the Carolinas as well. But that is just on the GFS there. And then now we'll compare it to the European model, and this is the 12Z run, the morning run from today, and there is no other. We'll go ahead and we'll look. Only just the 12Z European is out for right now. But so going back here, going to the start here, has the system again into the Caribbean, and this is all the way into Tuesday morning, and again does not have it really strengthening much, and then eventually kind of gets into maybe a tropical depression or a tropical storm sometime early on Wednesday, and eventually starts strengthening and probably delivers tropical storm like conditions into parts of western Cuba and into parts of the Yucatan Peninsula there. And then it continues to move to the north and finally strengthens a lot, basically into, not a lot, but strengthens finally into the Gulf of Mexico, especially the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and then moves it into maybe the Big Bend of Florida as a 981 storm, which would pretty much be a high-end tropical storm, maybe a hurricane by this point. And then it will continue into Georgia and then into eventually Tennessee and bring impacts into parts of the southeast. And so this is pretty similar to what the GFS has been showing, but it is quite a bit weaker than what the GFS shows. But that is it for the European, and eventually just gets it out and finally dissipates there. So then we'll look at the Canadian model. We'll back this up here. So I'll kind of go a little bit faster here because I feel like I'm going a little slow. But again, gets that developing, strengthens, and slowly into eventually a 991 storm into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, then a 989, and continues that up into the Florida Panhandle there, eventually kind of into a probably a tropical storm or a hurricane by this point, probably just a tropical storm. And so that will continue up into the southeast and again deliver impacts mainly into parts of the south and southeast United States. But that is again kind of similar to the European and GFS there. And so I'll just play that out a little farther, and eventually just dissipates and goes on out. And then we'll look at the icon model here real quick. And so this is the 18Z run from the icon. And so this would have it as a kind of has it not popping, but has a low that develops on Tuesday. Doesn't really show much there. Then eventually gets that low out and develops it again into the Gulf, and eventually deepens that low pressure and would make kind of a landfall. And this is kind of an outlier model here, but would make a landfall basically into the Big Bend as maybe a hurricane at this point. And so that would get it Category 1 hurricane, and then that would get it into the southeast and continue up into maybe Georgia and South Carolina right there, and then eventually North Carolina. But that is the end of the run. The 12Z run, which goes out further, has this quite a bit farther to the west and would have it basically attaching to this trough and putting it right into Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee, the center of circulation there from the icon. But that is the 12Z run, and then the 18Z run shows it quite a bit farther to the east. So we'll just kind of keep watching these trends, and unfortunately it is trending to a stronger scenario. But most models are again kind of showing it making a landfall, maybe somewhere into this area, and basically from Alabama all the way into the Big Bend of Florida here, and just the panhandle of Florida as a whole. But really the main area, I would say, if you live in the panhandle of Florida, I mean all the way into maybe Alabama, you'll have to continue to watch the storm, but mainly into parts of the into the panhandle and Big Bend of Florida, I would really watch if you live in those areas. But in just a second, we will look at kind of compare the models and just look at the different scenarios. So now looking at again the GFS here, and we'll just be mainly breaking down some of the areas, but the development of the system and what would promote the development of the system, and then we'll get into some of the factors that would the factors into where the system might go, if it would go mainly into parts of maybe Tennessee, Alabama, or Georgia, or would go farther to the east here. So first we'll be looking at the moist air and dry air. So this is the relative humidity values, and as you can see, we'll be looking at the GFS for this right now. And so here's our moisture associated with this system. And so again, you would have all this dry air to the west of the system, but the main question kind of with the development of the system is if dry air were to get into the circulation here and impact how the system develops. And so the GFS does not have that happening at all. It has most of that dry air to the west, mainly to the western Gulf of Mexico there, and then it would just eventually go up and into the southeast, and not really have any dry air that gets into it really as you get into kind of Friday, if any dry air gets into there. But mainly Friday will be the day to watch for that dry air. But again, we'll go back. I think I did forget to mention most of these models here have a landfall. I kind of did forget to mention this real quick, but most of these models have a landfall maybe sometime Thursday into Friday, but mainly Thursday night will be the main area or kind of time frame to watch Thursday night into Friday. But again, we'll go back to the GFS here. I apologize for not mentioning that. But again, looking back at the dry air and moist air, so really all that dry air would stay to the west in this scenario. But yeah, we'll just have to continue to watch that and see how that kind of dry air gets into the system. If it were to get into it, it would weaken it, and not weaken, but it would limit its potential to further develop into a stronger system. And then also looking at the we'll look at the 200 millibar winds here, the upper level winds. And so as the system goes all the way throughout the Caribbean and then eventually into the Gulf of Mexico, is gonna encounter little to no shear really into these areas, and it'll have a favorable environment for development as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, because these sea surface temperatures here, these waters are very warm and will promote that development of a system once it gets into these areas. But really you can check off sea surface temperatures off the list for development and just things to support development of this system. And then wind shear as well. You're really not going to have any wind shear that'll affect the system really as it gets closer to landfall, or even at landfall. It won't interact with any shear. But I mean, obviously you will have some shear as you get into kind of into the Caribbean and then further into the Gulf a little bit, but that is going to help the intensification of this system and will really support it as it gets into the Gulf and is able to develop. But as far as wind shear that would damage the storm or would basically limit it from developing any further, that would only be into the landfall period, I would say, or before landfall, kind of into this area here. And then lastly, we'll look at we'll go back here and we'll look at 500 millibar heights. And so kind of looking here, this is going to be a better example of what would happen if you obviously are going to have this troughing out here in two parts of kind of parts into the mid-south and into Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and then you are going to have a ridging out here to the east of this system into parts of the western Atlantic. And so the GFS has this moving up into the north, and then you have that ridging to the east that would basically already push that system farther to the west, as well as this troughing out here in this area of lower pressure. And so what happens here, it kind of gets slingshotted, you could say, and pushed up into the southeast, and that low pressure interacts with that and eventually kind of gets a hold on it and would push it up farther to the north, and would basically have it just kind of moving like this, and it would basically just kind of have no other option and move to the west of that high pressure, and then interact with that low pressure and eventually head off to the north. But that is on the GFS. And so again, the 18Z showed up on the runs here. I'm not sure why it didn't show up earlier, but we'll quickly look at that. And that doesn't go out all the way to the right time frame, but again, the European would support this also and would have probably some just slightly kind of that ridge slightly more to the west. So that would even make the system go farther to the west and might even promote a landfall further to the west compared to the GFS here. And so just in between these two runs, it kind of has shifted more to the west, and so that would support again a further west track. But again, this would move into this low pressure area of low pressure in this trough, and then interact with that ridge. But the European does show this area of lower pressure and this troughing farther to the south, and that would mean that it is able to kind of interact with it quicker and pull it farther to the west a little better. But again, once you combine that with the ridging and the area of low pressure, you're still going to have a track that kind of goes into Georgia, probably Florida, but Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, right there. If that kind of makes sense. I know that's a lot to kind of think about, but if that were to make sense, that would support that track there. And then real quick, we'll look at the icon, one of the outliers here between all the models, the main models we've been looking at. And so we'll look at 500 millibar heights, and so this would again have it tracking farther to the east and kind of going up into the Carolinas and Georgia, farther east into Georgia. And so what would happen here is the icon wants to show this troughing and low pressure not as strong as what the GFS and European would show, and it would show this area of ridging out into the Atlantic to the east of this weaker too, so that would promote a farther track to the east and basically to the northeast. But I feel like a lot of people aren't really talking about this trough and how this will interact with this system as much as I was thinking people would talk about it. But really, the time frame that this trough will move in will determine the further track of this system, as well as this area of higher pressure. How far to the west is this ridge? We'll have to figure that out, and that's just more things to consider over the next couple of days as we get the system that'll eventually move in to the Gulf and eventually strengthen. But really, the later arrival of this trough, probably the stronger it would be, and that would make it likely go further to the west. But the earlier arrival of this trough, the weaker it would probably be. The low pressure associated with the trough would be once the system were to move in. And so this system, Invest 97L, would have probably a further east track compared to a further west track with a area of stronger pressure and that stronger troughing to the west, if that makes any sense. And again, with a high pressure, that'll also influence how the system moves and travels throughout these areas. But that's really the main things to look at, kind of as we go over the next couple of days. But real quick, we'll just go look at the eastern U.S. here, and we'll look at our 500 millibar vortices here. And so here you can see this trough a lot better on the icon, and we'll just look at the GFS right quick as well. And so it would have this, we'll go further and we'll get about Thursday morning. So the GFS again has this trough further to the west, and it would have it probably just a little bit stronger, I would say, compared to the icon. But again, further west there and a little bit stronger than looking at the icon. Kind of further to the east there. And so again, this would actually have it a little bit stronger on the icon, but not much. It's relatively the same. And so that would eventually kind of continue and shows that troughing moving kind of to the southwest. And so the GFS again hasn't moving to the southwest, but we'll have to see again how strong this troughing is, this area of lower pressure to the west is, and it's really how it picks up on the system. And so looking at the 12Z European as well, actually we'll look at there's the 18Z, we'll look at the 12Z. And so this would have the area, this troughing further to the northwest, and so that would make it grab onto that, but eventually kind of pull it further to the west. And then again, looking at the icon, I know it's kind of getting annoying with me switching around so much here, but really the further to the west in this kind of not orientation, but the further to the west, and the way this trough moves is going to kind of affect how the system moves itself. So if that makes any sense at all. But again, I do think we'll have some sort of landfall into this area right here where my cursor is going around. But that'll really be it for the models here and looking at each one and comparing. But quickly we'll look at the ensembles here, and so we'll go back to the Western Atlantic view and go to the ensemble members here, right here. And so again, looking first at the GEFS ensemble, and then looking at the Euro, and then again we'll look at the hurricane models in just a second. But most of the members from the GEFS have it making basically a landfall into the panhandle of Florida. Some members have it all the way kind of further to the east end of the Big Bend, and some are way out here closer to Louisiana and even Mississippi and Alabama. But generally most models are showing a spread right here, and so even some of the members are showing a track further to the east. But again, the general idea from the GEFS is showing members right here, mainly making a track maybe through Alabama, Georgia, maybe into Tennessee, and then affecting areas around that. But that is it for the GEFS ensemble. And then quickly looking at the EPS ensemble here, again, it does have quite a few members further to the east, has just maybe one or two further to the west into Mississippi or Alabama, but most of the model members here are actually kind of further to the east of this like area of low pressure right here, and the members show up making a landfall likely into the Big Bend of Florida, or even further into the western Florida peninsula there, and then eventually moving up into maybe Georgia, Alabama, or Tennessee there. But that is it for the ensemble members and models and members there. And so lastly, we'll be looking at the hurricane models here, and so we won't be focusing too much on this because this is actually the first run from the hurricane models on this Invest itself. So this is the first run out of many that are to come for this system here. So first we'll be looking at the HWRF model, and so looking at radar and radar here. So as that low pressure spinning there and continuing, and then by Monday night to Tuesday has it all the way into a hurricane here likely, and then eventually makes it into probably a category 2 hurricane, and then eventually continues deepening in low pressure, and would have really areas into parts of western Cuba really getting some strong impacts from the system, and would have basically I would say kind of a strong category 2 hurricane moving in between the Yucatan Peninsula and western Cuba, and then eventually deepening that system further into a strong category 3, and then heading to the north and continuing into a category 4 storm, and then eventually making a landfall as basically a mid-range, kind of mid-end category 4 storm here. But again, I don't think we'll really look at this too much because again, it is far out for these hurricane models, and just from now until tomorrow night, this is going to change like crazy. Really looking in between both of them, not both, but some of these hurricane models are going to change a lot from now until just tomorrow. But this would be probably the absolute worst case scenario, especially for the panhandle of Florida and the Big Bend here. But that would have it making a landfall is basically a category 4 hurricane, a major hurricane showing up here on the HWRF. But then going back here all the way to the start, and then looking at the HMON model and looking at the Invest 97L, it does have that eventually moving to the northwest as it's been predicted to go, and it would have that low pressure a little bit farther to the west, so areas into western Cuba might not get affected as badly, but still areas of parts into the Yucatan Peninsula here would get impacted with this system, and then eventually has it as basically a category 1 or a low-end category 2 hurricane by then, continues into the Gulf of Mexico to the north, and then would eventually have it really hitting we'll go back here all the way kind of into Thursday morning, already having impacts into parts of the Florida peninsula, and so it would have it basically making a landfall into kind of central or northern Florida as a 942 millibar storm, which would be kind of a strong category 3 storm, which would still be a major hurricane by this time. And then it actually gets it off of the coast of the southeast and then continues up the coast into South Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. But again, this is pretty far out, and really anything over 90 hours is a stretch on these hurricane models for the most part. Not always, but again, that is just more guidance. We need to kind of continue to watch and see how this might play out. But again, this would have it strengthening pretty strong and would be another bad to worst case scenario. But this would be, I would say the HMON and the HWRF are pretty, they're two different solutions. So the further the system would have time over water would be, the longer it would have to intensify further. And so this would be probably the scenario if it were to interact with land quicker, kind of in the Thursday into Friday morning. But again, that is the HMAL model. And then lastly, we'll look at the HAFSA or the HFSA model, however you want to pronounce it. And again, we'll look at Invest 97L here. And so we'll go back a little bit. And then by tomorrow night, has it as a tropical storm, continues to the north and northwest, and then would eventually get quite close to the Yucatan Peninsula there, and in between Cuba, western Cuba, and would have it as a Category 1 hurricane by this time. Continues in the Gulf of Mexico here. Then would already start impacting parts of western Florida, and would continue into the Panhandle of Florida as a 953 millibar storm, and that would have it sitting at a Category 3 storm and would be a major hurricane by this time. And so again, this will be still a bad scenario if this were to happen, and a scenario we don't want to happen, excuse me. But going back to the HWRF model, it is kind of the middle ground between the HFSA model and HMAL model, with the HFSA model showing it up here, HWRF showing it here, and the HMAL model showing it further into kind of western and central Florida. So the HWRF is kind of the middle ground between these two models, and would again be a worst case scenario for the Panhandle of Florida there. But again, this is just more model guidance we need to continue to watch here. And we'll go back to Invest 97 now on the HFSA model, and that would still have it going up there, and then eventually making its not landfall, but continuing up into Alabama and Georgia there. But that is going to be it for the weather models for tonight, and just really looking at Invest 97L for tonight. So just real quick here, we'll be looking at the day 1 and day 2 convective outlook. Actually, we'll go back to the day 1. We're on the day 2 now, but looking at the day 1 convective outlook for tonight. So this is the 010 update, and this will update again in a little less than 4 hours. And so we do have a marginal risk into parts of central and kind of western Texas a little bit there, right there. And then we do not have a tornado risk with this, but we do have a wind and hail risk with this risk here. But we do have a 5% wind risk associated with this marginal risk, and a 5% hail risk associated with this risk for tonight on Sunday, September the 22nd. Then looking at tomorrow's severe weather risk for Monday, September the 23rd, 2024, we do have a marginal risk here all the way from parts of northern Arkansas into southeast Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, into Kentucky, and then parts of most of northern Tennessee there. There's no tornado risk with this marginal risk for tomorrow on day 2, but there is a wind risk with this. Again, that is a 5% wind risk associated with this marginal risk here, and then another 5% risk associated with this marginal risk for tomorrow on Monday, the 23rd of September. And that is that risk. And then lastly, looking at day 3, there's no marginal risk or any risk besides a general thunderstorm risk here across most of the eastern and parts of the south central United States here. And so we also do have a little bit of a general thunderstorm risk here into southern Florida. But again, that is it for the day 1 through 3 severe weather outlooks. So that's going to be it for tonight's upload. I do really appreciate all of y'all watching and whoever clicked on the video. I will say this is definitely not my best Tropics update I've ever done. I apologize, but I have kind of been slurring my words throughout most of the video, and I do apologize for that. But again, I do appreciate all of y'all watching, and again, I am trying to improve with each upload and each video. And it really does I really do appreciate when y'all like or even dislike the video. But any feedback in the comments would be great, or if y'all have a question or anything that y'all want me to answer, feel free to put it in the comments, anything. But again, I do appreciate all of y'all watching the video, and that'll be it for this update. But I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's night or a great rest of y'all's day.